Welcome to a new chapter of Beyond the Brink. I'm your host, Rosemary Armao, and my topic this week is press freedom in the US and in the world. It's bad, it's declining, in part because of really bad behavior by the media, and in part because of politics and economics. You know that I like to introduce you in my podcast to some of the intriguing people that I've met in my 50 some year career in journalism. And Mark Lee Hunter, the guest for today, is one of those people. He's an investigative reporter, an author, and a mega media trainer. He's worked throughout the Middle East and Europe, not just in the United States. We met like 30 years ago when he was investigating me. We did not start out as friends. I was the new executive director of Investigative Reporters and Editors. It's a training group for investigative reporters, and he was assigned to check me out. He will tell you that he was kind to me. I had some complaints, but we have since become colleagues and fellow trainers. Yeah, friends, I would say, right, Mark?
So far as I'm concerned.
I've come to appreciate his skills and his dedication to this field, which I love, and to his forceful and opinionated insights, which is what I want him to share in this chapter. I do want to warn you that while press freedom is the topic, and we're going to start out that way, I intend to veer off on a tangent, a more personal topic to both of us, and that's the right to die. Most of you know that I've recently lost my mother, and Mark is a widower. He lost an amazing wife, Sophie, an architect and a designer a few years back. New York State has just passed a law that gives some measure of freedom to the terminally ill for the first time to figure out when and how they want to die. And we're going to have some things to say about that. But first, Mark, tell me this. Do you think reporters have some sort of an obligation, a duty to defend democracy? Because it's in trouble right now, at least in the United States and in some other places. And we keep hearing that reporters are not doing enough to protect the democracy we have.
Well, democracy is what makes reporting possible. It also made my existence possible. Okay, like you, Rosemary, I'm part Italian,
Hmm.
and my people came to the United States at the turn of the 20th century, and nobody leaves home because they're happy there. People they were economic refugees. Like so many people who come to the United States now. So, uh, democracy made it possible for me to have an interesting life. It made it possible for a descendant of Italian peasants to become a journalist and a scholar and a university professor and, any number of other things I've done. Otherwise, I'd still be on Sicily, tending goats.
Yep.
So, you
Story I'm
know,
familiar with.
yeah, so there's that. And, the other thing is that if you don't have democracy, you don't really have a need for news, okay? Because the news is there so that people can decide how they're going to vote, among other things, and what kind of lives they want to have, and more to give people a voice of their own in what's going on. I mean, this isn't just a business for professional journalists now. There are a lot of other people who are doing the job. So, the right to stand up and say what you think and hopefully to back it up with genuine facts as opposed to whatever your fantasies might be is crucial to the society. And, you know, we are in a moment of great danger for this, not just in the US.
Correct. That's why I wanted you. Mark, if I haven't explained to listeners, is an American, obviously, but he's lived since the 1980s in France. Uh,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure that you fully answered my question, but let me add this to it now. In 2025, the World Press Freedom Index, which comes out every year, it's put out by Reporters Without Borders,
Yeah.
ranked the United States 57th out of 180 countries. 50,
Yeah.
that's the problematic range. 2 years ago, just 2 years ago, the United States was at 45, which isn't great, but that's an 11 place drop in 2 years.
Hmm.
And it reflects rising hostility, threats, violence, economic struggles in newsrooms, declining public trust, all kinds of bad stuff. And the Constitution protects the press, supposedly, but we've still fallen. And I point out that France is at 25, by the way. France is,
Yeah, France is a great country to be a reporter. I mean, look, I've spent my life, my adult life in France mainly. And I've often said to myself, what other country would let a foreigner and an American, come in and say disagreeable things about the people running the country? I mean,
right.
I spent a good 15 years doing practically nothing but investigating the French elite. And, you know, okay, at one point I was blacklisted, but that was, more hilarious than anything else. And, you know, uh, France at 25, well, the Nordic states are probably right up there at the top.
They are.
But France is still a place where, you are very free to do what you think needs to be said and done. And, I'm grateful to the country for having given me that opportunity.
So
And
how
I
can
must
France
say,
do it? How can France do it, Mark, and the United States can't? We supposedly are the pioneers and the big braggarts about our press freedom and our First Amendment.
well, I don't think any politician in France would have the courage to tell the French to shut up. They have very, very loud voices. Okay, and the level of political involvement in France, I mean, ordinary political involvement, people being active in the society and taking part in things is much higher than in the United States. People are
Interesting.
people are much more concerned with their private lives here, and the French, have larger public lives. I mean, they're simply engaged in a tremendous range of things, and it's what makes the country work, by the way. And the other thing is that, obviously the Trump administration has always made it evident that it despises, hates, maybe even fears journalists. And there's one aspect of press freedom that you didn't refer to, but I think is crucial to talk about. And that was the cancellation of USAID, the United States
Oh, yeah.
Agency for International Development. I mean, the United States was, essentially footing the bill for 40% of truly independent media around the world. Now, we won't get into, the other things they were doing, which were literally life-saving
Right.
for millions of people around the world, and many of those people are now dying or dead.
Yep.
But the same applies to independent media. The United States paid for a lot of the people that I trained, okay, for a lot of the people who were doing brave work in incredibly difficult places. And by the way, I would just like to make a side note that the destruction of USAID was kicked off by a very misguided investigation in quotation marks by the French journal Mediapart and the American journal Dropsite News.
Yep.
These people told a story that was simply not supported, but that portrayed investigative journalists as how shall I put it, puppets
Yeah.
of the
Agents.
United States government. Yeah, agents of the United States government. And now that campaign is extending into Europe. It's being advanced by Hungary, notably, to attack European Union funding for independent journalism.
And
So this was I repeat, in quotes, investigation that had catastrophic results around the world. And I very much regret that they published that. I haven't seen a good reason for them to have done so, but that's what they did, and we're
well,
living
Mark,
with the
you know that
consequences.
I worked and we have worked on projects together where we've taken money from Soros and from USAID, and it was well spent.
And from the U.S. State Department, and from the
Absolutely.
governments of France, Germany, Sweden.
UK, the Scandinavian countries, and yet, did you ever feel like you were an agent of any of that government, any of those
No
governments?
one
No
ever
way.
told me what to do.
Exactly.
It was very clear to me that those initiatives were soft power initiatives.
Right.
And, Mediapart has participated in at least one of those as well. They worked with the French media agency CFI in Burkina Faso, if my memory is correct.
Hmm.
And, this is perfectly legitimate. I applaud them doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, we've
I
done a
can't,
number of programs about USAID. I think that's one of the most hideous things that the Trump administration has done. I'm going to pull you back to the
sure.
intel mark. You mentioned two things I want to bring up. One is the role of the consumer, the news consumer, and what's happening and the attacks and the weakening of the media. In America, we believe President Trump when he says press is the enemy of the people. Trust has never been lower according to all the polls in what the media is saying. It's very difficult to know what media is in the minds of the people answering the questions because it's so divided. But people don't seem to know what a danger it is to not have an independent media. We've worked in places where they didn't have a media, and
Yes.
now we're moving towards that here.
Well, we are and we aren't. I mean, there are counter movements as well. You know that, I've also published theoretical books about media development and, what it may look like. And I've always said, Gav, in fact, I've been saying it for the last, 17 years, that we're entering an era in which the kind of independent media we now see around us on all sides, small operations that are begun by people who have a mission and that serve a particular community are multiplying. Most of them are starve-ups, as we used to say about startups. They're starve-ups, that people don't have many resources. But, I think that's going to be giving way to consolidation very soon, that, different shops that are in different places that are doing pretty much the same thing are going to be forced to come together because there aren't enough resources to be running all the others. And I think that there's going to be a period of growth. And if you would like to see a precedent for how that can happen, just
Mhm.
turn your eyes to the right. I mean, that's what Steve Bannon did. That's what the Gateway Pundit
Very
did.
interesting. Talk more
Yeah.
about that. That's an interesting, I've not thought about that.
Well, if you look at where the innovation has come from in media over the last 30 years, let's say since broadband internet started to scoop the legs out from
Hmm.
under legacy media.
Yeah.
Okay, you see that the innovators have been people like Greenpeace, who use investigative journalism to hold together a membership, a paying membership of 3
Right.
million people.
Right.
Okay, you see, and they call themselves a media organization, and you know what they are.
They are. Yeah.
Yeah,
Southern Poverty Center does the same. They've done amazing work.
of course.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
And Bannon did the same thing. He saw
Right.
that there was a possibility for media, and it began even before that. Since the 1970s, Christian radio began laying the groundwork for what later became Fox. Okay,
Mhm.
these are, by the way, that was documented and theorized by a brilliant woman named Sarah Diamond, who later went on to do other work as a lawyer. But she wrote an absolute classic called Roads to Dominion, which is about this movement on the Christian right. So if they could do it, why couldn't the left?
Hmm. Hmm.
And they were doing it in a different way from what mainstream media were doing. Okay, their motto was not all the news that's fit to print. Their motto was protect, promote, prevail.
Hmm.
Okay,
Interesting.
I mean, they never said it that way, but that's what it was. Protect your community, promote your community, very evangelical,
Hmm.
and prevail. They
Hmm.
were there to prevail. And, the mainstream media with its, sort of stance of neutrality, which, nobody really believed in, but, it was an ideal.
We
And
did pay lip service to it for sure. Yeah.
well, it wasn't just lip service, it was an ideal, and an ideal is something that you always fail to attain or it isn't worth much. So I understand that. But, you know, events like the Washington Post, refusing to endorse anyone in 2024. I mean, they paid for that by losing, at least 20% of their public right away. I was one of the people who canceled my subscription.
That
I
was
thought this is
another.
not what I thought this is not what I'm looking to you for. And they
Right.
continue to pay for that. So, what people are expecting from media now is that we're going to make their lives better, that we're going to fight for them, and that we're going to give them a place to belong. It's not that difficult to
Exactly.
understand.
And that would explain the success that we're seeing on Substack and the Starbucks, as you call them. They are getting more and more visibility.
Well, on Substack, I believe that's where Heather Cox Richardson is, isn't
It
it?
is. Yes.
Well, look at her.
Hmm.
She's fighting.
She's got a bigger circulation than most of the big newspapers in their heydays in the 1990s. But
Well, that doesn't surprise me.
no, no, it's true. Here's another thing, though. The independent media that I am so intent on protecting, I am ashamed of them. I don't want to protect them. The latest you mentioned, the Washington Post. The latest is CBS under Barry Weiss. The station is owned by Paramount, the billionaire son of a big Trump and a Trump supporter who did not believe in the election in 2020 has now taken over CBS. And we had their new host talking last week when we invaded Venezuela about Marco Rubio. We salute you. You are the ultimate Florida man. That's a direct quote. And this was after CBS had also withheld a story about the atrocities going on in prisons that we're sending people to in El Salvador. So that's not a place I want to defend. ABC gave up a threatened lawsuit rather than go to court and fight it. It settled it, and it was over calling Donald Trump an adjudicated rapist, which he factually actually is. They just said, okay, still we'll just give you millions for your library. I don't like the way the independent media is acting.
Well, first of all, that's no longer independent media.
Right, you're right.
Okay,
They're
okay.
captured.
I mean, CBS and the Washington Post are owned by people who have a tremendous stake in the success of the Trump administration.
Hmm.
Okay, and I wasn't aware of those remarks by Dokupil
Yeah,
regarding Venezuela, but I think it's very sad.
yeah.
The ultimate Florida man, what does that mean?
We salute you, Marco Rubio. This was Walter Cronkite's station. That it was the Medallion uh, news organization, and to fall so low. And I'm only talking about legacy media. Let's talk about social media, which again, run by a bunch of oligarchs, if you will, who have great allegiance to Trump.
Okay. When you talk about social media, okay, there are the
Hmm.
platforms which are owned by the oligarchs, of course.
Right.
Okay. When you talk about the content, this is where you see a lot of these stakeholder-driven media that I'm talking about, the
Yes.
ones that are there to protect, promote, and prevail. That's the open door for them. That's the free ride that gets you to people. And, you know, again, these are spaces that have been left to one side of the aisle. That's a big mistake. People are making up for the mistake now, and I don't think it's too late because the goal at this point is not to convince the other side that they're wrong, which is, what a number of journalists continue to believe. No, you're not going to do that. You're not going to change people's minds just because, you say, well, you haven't seen it right. Okay, that
Hmm.
doesn't happen. But what is going to happen is the construction of communities that care about the same things and that care about the same facts. And those communities are naturally going to prosper because they will have reality to work from. And when you're trying to make yourself a future and you're trying to have a prosperous and, safe life for you and yours, it's a hell of a lot, pardon me, it's a heck of a lot better to know what the real facts are as opposed to what someone who lies every day for a living in an office is going to tell you. And
But go ahead. Go
you
ahead. I'm sorry.
well, it's called actionable information. If
Right.
we are delivering people actionable information in a frame that enables them to understand it, people are not going to let us go away because, we're walking into the jungle now and people are going to need a guide through the jungle. And if we can be that guide, well, maybe we have a future.
Okay, this is perfect because I want to lead you now through a number of things that are being done to the press to stop and belittle and to just defang the press, and how should they respond? And let's start with the ice killing in Minnesota this past week. We saw
Yeah.
a video. It's everywhere. Everybody has seen what has happened, and you have politicians, the top politicians in the country, coming out minutes after the shooting, no investigation, looking at the same video that we are all looking at, telling an entirely different story than what most of us saw. How does the media deal with that?
Well, first of all, I mean, the function right now is to get the real facts before people because obviously the so-called official facts don't correspond to what the evidence shows, or at least it's very debatable. I
Mhm.
mean, calling the woman a domestic terrorist,
Yeah.
this is oof, and it's clear that the actions of the ICE people were ambiguous. There was tremendous confusion. They went for their guns pretty quick, and the agent, you know, I am not convinced that that guy was in immediate danger, certainly not in mortal danger. I do understand that on a previous occasion he had been dragged 50 yards in the performance of his duties. I don't know anything else about that, but he has my sympathy. I think it's very possible that he was traumatized deeply by that incident, and it may have affected his
Traumatized
judgment.
people perhaps should not be in law enforcement situations like he was.
Well, this whole situation was obviously a command failure.
Yeah.
I mean, that situation should never have arisen.
Okay, but it did. Now tell me what the media should be doing about this.
Well, what they're doing, I've seen a lot of analyses about this situation. I mean, people have more or less their own opinions about it, and
Right.
they're trying to convince people. I spent the weekend watching Fox with a friend,
Yeah.
and they have their take. They have their take on that.
Yeah.
Okay, and there are insinuations about that.
The
But
polls are coming out and they're overwhelmingly against the government. They don't believe what the government is saying.
well, no. And, the government is taking a tremendous risk. I mean, we have the habit of underestimating the integrity of a lot of conservatives in this country. I mean, I look at various social media. I was on Quora today and I saw, a guy saying, I'm the first to stand up for law enforcement. And what happened in Minnesota is an aberration.
Hmm.
This guy violated every tenet of good policing.
Yeah, including being traumatized in a situation where he's shooting at civilians.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay, so the
the,
media, I'm going to hold you.
no, what I'm saying is that it is a mistake to assume that because somebody voted for Donald Trump, they don't have a mind.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Okay, and that they
Yeah.
won't react to facts. And, nobody likes being lied to.
Yeah. Okay, good point. Here's another one. Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense, says you have to sign this paper, reporter, saying you won't report on anything that we don't give you permission to report on, or else you can't stay in the Pentagon. And
Well, if
yeah.
Pete Hegseth imagines that he can stop determined reporters from finding what they know they're looking for, because that's the whole key in investigation. You have to have a pretty good idea what you're looking for.
Hmm.
That raises your chances of finding it. But if Pete Hegseth thinks he's going to stop the contemporary version of Seymour Hersh from getting what he wants to know, he's out of his mind.
It might
If
even
he
increase the chances he's going to annoy enough of his own people in the military they could turn into leaks and sources.
Well, there is an argument being made right now by people who know the law much better than I do that, the actions that Hegseth is asking his people to undertake are war crimes.
Hmm.
There's a report in the New York Times that just broke, that the plane that attacked the first boat in Venezuela, where survivors clinging to the wreckage were killed,
Right.
okay, was marked as a civilian plane. This is a war crime.
Oh,
If
wow.
this is true, it's a war crime. And there are people in the military who are not going to let that by.
Right.
And this is why, of course, it seems to me that that's why he's attacking Mark Kelly. But I think they made a mistake picking on Mark Kelly. Man, that guy looks to me like he's extremely brave.
Yeah, he's a saint too. He's an astronaut, a military hero, a senator. One more of these. How should the media handle it? The government cut all funding for public broadcasting.
Yeah, yeah,
What's the response? You can't do much journalism without money.
that's absolutely right. So what we'll probably see is that some of the people on public broadcasting, are we talking about the Corporation for
Yes,
Public
yes,
Broadcasting?
absolutely.
Okay, that was cut, and I don't know all the details of their relationship to NPR or PBS. I understand they provided them PBS with 10% of their funding, if that's
Correct.
correct.
Right.
Okay, 10% is a hit you can survive. Okay, if you're doing a good enough job, and PBS does incredible stuff, you will get support, or you'll have to make some cutbacks as the
Well,
organized.
NPR is actually reporting, stations nationwide are reporting an uptick in donations from citizens and listeners who are trying to compensate for the lost money.
When you give people what they need, they will
Mhm.
not let you go away that easily.
All right, how about Voice of America? That also was cut. All that's gone. And
Yeah.
you do know about Voice of America. You have worked with
Oh, gee, do I know about Voice of America?
yeah.
Sure. Well, this is a tragedy for the United States. It's a disinvestment in information that people around the world depended on in the face of authoritarian propaganda. Removing funding for it is, it's just crazy. It's saying that America doesn't stand for America anymore.
Yeah.
But when you put someone like Carrie Lake in charge of an operation like that, what do you expect?
We are talking with Mark Lee Hunter. I've gotten so into the conversation, I've not said his name, and that's a mistake. Mark is a investigative journalist and a
And a media
trainer
scholar.
and a media scholar. Yeah, you have many hats. Here's my last question about media, although I'll welcome you to say anything else you want. But here's my last
Yeah,
question. When we began doing media development overseas, like some 30 years ago, Mark, um,
yeah.
we were frequently told by the people we talked to, oh, you Americans, it's different there. You don't have the same situation we do. You don't have leaders who are threatening to put you in jail or shut down your publication. You have laws that protect you. It's not the same. You can't teach us anything. I find that so ironic when I think about it now. Can you talk about what we as American journalists might learn from people in countries that are already where I think America might be moving to a much more controlled situation? What are the lessons we've learned?
Well, the first thing you can learn is how to be brave.
Yeah,
Okay. I mean, the thing that always humbled me all of those years was how incredibly brave these people were.
I agree.
Okay. The second thing we can learn from them is that their work that this work matters. Because, the reason those people are repressed, the reason they're smacked around by cops and politicians and put in jail and all of that is because their work has tremendous impact. And it has the impact of telling people what they're never going to hear from the people who, run their lives or are trying to run them. So, that's the second thing we can learn from them. And the third thing we can learn from them is how to get the work done with hardly any resources.
Oh, wow. That's
They're
so true.
incre
Yeah,
they're
they're very
incredibly
resourceful. Yep.
they're incredibly inventive. I mean, you saw this. You worked with me in Riga in the future media management program, which we started up that year. You
Hmm.
saw these people. Some of the people you were teaching went on to found the Kiev Independent.
Yep, which I sent money to for almost 4 years now. Yeah,
Me too.
yep, yep. Yeah, I think support of journalists in other countries goes a long way, and I hope that we will be getting support from third world countries, as we used to call them, who
Yeah.
they know what we're facing now.
Yeah, and we have to be inventive too. Maria Ressa, the Nobel Prize
Yeah,
laureate,
from the
and
Philippines,
founder of Rappler in the Philippines, which is an incredibly brave outlet and who do great work.
and has
Y-
brought down prime ministers, corrupt prime ministers. Very, very
Yes,
important.
actually, in the Philippines, it's president. Fact
Yeah,
check.
sorry, it is. You're right.
Yeah.
You're
So,
right.
but Maria Ressa, you know, uh, started a company that does social media analysis, for corporate clients, for people who, can pay for serious work. And that's what's supporting Rappler now.
Hmm.
I mean, why are we so little creative? I mean, probably
Because we had
because,
it so good and so easy for many years. When we started, you just got a job with a big company and you were there for life, and they took care of this stuff. We didn't
well,
have to
I
think
never had
about
a
the
job.
business.
I never had a job with a big company, and I'm still here. We don't have to have jobs with big companies that are shrinking by the day.
Well,
And we
here
don't we don't have to pitch our tent on a burning platform.
we don't, but look at what journalism offers to the young people that I'm teaching in college now. Not a lot of money, no job security, no respect, very little trust, and such an uncertain future that you have to be creative as well as do journalism, creative
Yes.
business wise.
Okay.
That's
Now I
that's
have
not attractive.
I have to say something, okay?
Okay.
Practically the only journalism professors who were really equipping young reporters for a viable future were the investigative journalism professors,
Yep.
because investigation is a skill that will always keep you fed.
Right.
Being able to find out what's going on makes you valuable. It makes you intensely valuable, and that's why I'm still here today.
Oh, that's
Okay. Oh,
that's
yeah. I mean, when I could no longer make it as a freelance investigator, I became a business school researcher. And guess
right.
what? They paid me to do investigations.
Right. Right.
Nice work, great people. The news industry has never valued reporting at its true value
That's
because people want to do it. People want to express themselves. So it's like the Hollywood casting couch. You're lucky just to get in the room, kid. And too bad for them. They
well, I
want the talent to walk out the door and do their own thing and get something going that is theirs. Thanks. You
yeah.
know, but for that to happen, there will have to be closer ties between journalism schools and business schools, or somebody will have to
Right.
create schools where these two things are taught. You show people not only how to make a life, which is what reporting is about, but how to make a living. And, how they can build their own shops and get things done. And journalism schools failed to do this
They do. And as a
throughout the
journalism
period
teacher,
when
that's true.
internet was eating the lunch
Hmm.
of news organizations. I mean, this is so upsetting, to anyone who cares about young journalists. Just seeing that the journalism schools kept on doing the same thing, okay, when the market they were preparing students for no longer existed. They were
Right.
stealing these kids' lives, and
That's
this is wrong.
That's harsh, but I have to agree. I also think that we need to attract different kinds of young journalists into the business. They have to be like the kids that we saw in Eastern Europe, Mark, who see their job as patriotic, which brings me back to my beginning question. Yes, it is the duty of journalism to protect democracy. And
Yeah.
I think we got away from that. It was like looking for scandal, for hits, for, I don't know, a story that would get attention to you. We lost our way a little bit.
Well, the purpose of journalism is not to get close to Robert F. Kennedy Jr., if that's what you mean. But
Olivia.
yeah, Olivia Nutsey, I think that's her name. But but this has always been a problem in journalism. A lot of people become journalists. Let's tell the truth here. A lot of people become journalists because they have very low self-esteem, and they either want to get close to or to avenge themselves on people whom they think are better than them. That's the
Right.
unspoken,
Or avoid doing math. That's
yeah,
the other.
or avoid having to think about money.
Yeah.
But but these are not good reasons to become a journalist. And if that means that, fewer people will take the path because they're going to say, oh, there must be an easier way to do this, well, okay. And if it means that we're going to be looking for people who really want to have power in the world, the power to bring people together, the power to protect them, the power to help them win their fights. If that's what we're looking for, we're going to find them. The right has been finding them.
Yes,
Okay?
sir.
So why aren't we?
Yeah. That's a very good question. We haven't had to, and now suddenly we do. So we got to make some adjustments.
Well,
Um,
it's not too late, but we have
no, no,
to
it
make
is.
some adjustments.
Right. We're talking with Mark Lee Hunter, who's an American, lived in France. He is a media scholar, a teacher, a trainer, a investigative reporter. And we're not going to talk about any of that for the next few minutes. I want Mark to talk about the loss of his wife and how it made you an advocate for something we are beginning to see happening in New York and in other places in the United States, and that's having decisions, having the right to make a decision about how we go out of the world. Tell us about
First of all, I'd like to say a big thank you to Governor Kathy Hochul, if that's how I pronounce her name. I
Hochul.
live in France.
Yeah, Hochul. It's not a French name.
Okay, well, a big thanks to Governor Kathy Hochul, who watched her mother die of ALS, which is the disease that killed my wife. Okay. And I don't know what went on in that house, but whatever it was, it told Kathy Hochul that people should be able to decide when they want to go. And they should be helped by people who know that helping them to pass before the worst arrives. And believe me, the worst is beyond what you can imagine.
Oh,
Okay.
Mark.
So to that she said this has to stop, and she used her power as governor to back the brave legislators who brought that to the floor and got it passed, and she backed them up. Well, bravo, bravo,
Mhm.
governor. Okay, and this is happening more and more around the world because people are living older. Neurodegenerative diseases and cancer are both on the rise. There are no cures for these conditions. People's lives are extended in in the face of incredible suffering. And there's another aspect of the story which I lived personally, okay, which is that forcing people to die in these conditions can destroy everyone around them. I mean, I was nearly killed when Sophie went down
Oh,
just because I was exhausted. I've never known what it is to be truly exhausted. But taking care of someone who needs help every minute of every day for a couple of years, that's all she lasted, will take it out of you. You become prone to accidents. Sophie's sister nearly died in my house when she fell down the stairs one night.
oh, yeah.
I mean, you just watch the wreckage spreading around you and you think, well, will I survive this? I did an investigation of the right to die in France, which has been stalled by an opposition that doesn't hesitate to lie for years. One of the things they lie about is the people who help people who are
Mm.
stricken with these kind of conditions, people
Mhm.
like me. Okay. And, I was stunned to discover that in France, there are 6 million people who take care of someone who can't take care of themselves every day. 6 million in a country of 66 million. How many of them are there in the United States? And in France, we still have great support from the society. There are citizens associations who send people to your house to help. All the medical care is paid for. Oh, and by the way, a big thanks to the Trump administration for their incompetence in handling the renewal of subsidies to people for their health care.
Yeah.
This is scandalous
Hmm.
that in the richest country in the world, you can't get the same level of care that my wife had in France because we were living in a country that they call communist,
Right.
but that in fact is a democracy, and this is what the people want.
Right. Right.
Okay?
As you know, I also took care of my mother for it was
Yes.
7 years before she died, and she had dementia. And
Yeah.
she is not covered by the new law. She was before she lost and couldn't speak at all, a big advocate of the right to die, the death.
Did she ask to die?
She she wanted to. She talked frequently about it, both before and after the dementia really began to affect her. And she said she would like to kill herself, but lacked the courage.
Well, my wife asked me to kill her.
Oh God, Mark.
And I have met, yeah, she asked me more than once.
Yeah,
And I
that's
said no because, because if I took that risk, this is not very brave of me. I was brave enough to take care of her, but not brave enough to face a murder charge.
yeah, I hear you. And I said that to my mother. I said, are you asking us to kill you?" And she said, "No, I don't want you to lose your life. I just want to get out of this one."
Well, Sophie eventually realized that that's what she was asking me to do.
How
But
how old was your wife when you lost her, Mark?
65,
Yeah, see, that's such a shame.
she tried to kill herself twice in front of me,
Oh
once
my
with a
God.
knife and once by trying to knock down a hornet's nest.
Wow. And you had no right, there's no law in France that would have allowed you to for her to make decisions about when to go.
Well, in fact, there was a passage in existing law that would have allowed her to benefit from, fatal sedation. But the hospital didn't bother to help us with it. They didn't bother to tell us about it.
Wow. I I,
You
I
know, and
I am sad that while New York has a law and it is a beginning, it has some big failings. One is that it won't go into effect for a year. And as the advocates for the bill said,
boy, for Sophie, that wouldn't have been any help at all.
right, exactly. And the advocates here are saying I
Okay,
just can't
listen,
help but think of the people who are going to die if they
listen, I
do.
would like all of my friends in America, all of you who belong to the community that believes that you have certain rights over your body. We can talk about what those rights are, but one of them is surely the right to decide when you can't bear living anymore.
Right.
Okay. And Samuel Alito, in the judgment that struck down Roe versus Wade, focused on the right to die 6 times. He
Hmm.
said that it had always been foreign to our laws, which is not true. There are now 12, no, 13 jurisdictions in the United States that recognize the right to die now that Illinois and New York are on it.
Right.
And you know, Alito is plainly inviting, legal actions that will lead to striking down the protection
The
for
laws that
people,
exist.
the
Right.
protection for people who want to spare their loved ones the absolute worst that can happen to them. I mean, the opponents to the right to die talk about natural death. There is nothing natural
No.
about dying from ALS, believe me.
Or from dementia. I keep saying I'm a journalist. I've seen dead people, my whole adult
Yeah.
life. But it's really different seeing a dead person and seeing someone die. Completely different experience. And it makes you realize how fragile it all is and how the law and the government just has no role in the decision making at all. Terry Schiavo, I go back to that case, another big Florida death and dying case where a woman was brain.
Where someone kept
Yep.
someone alive for
Deb
years. Yeah, we
Bush.
had one of those in France. The opponents to the right to die love those cases.
Yeah, yeah.
They
And
love
as,
those
as it
cases.
turned out, after she died and they did the autopsy, she had no brain. She was a vegetable, and there was no human in there to protect anymore. It's horrible. Like you say, the
Well,
effect on the family was just
it's not just that,
devastating.
it's like, how can you possibly say that it's God's will to make people suffer uselessly? What is the use of making someone watch themselves fall apart? Is it supposed to teach them that we must submit to God's will? Is this why we were created? I
Wow.
mean, Christ went up on the cross for us.
Mhm.
Okay? Christ chose to die for us. Why must we be forced to live?
It's a very persuasive argument, and the opponents simply say life is very holy, and if we allow these laws, then people who have disabilities can be coerced into signing. I want to.
Yeah, that's always what they say,
Although it's
and
never happened in the United States, by the way.
well, it may have happened. I mean, it is possible that there are cases in which someone pushed someone to die, but these situations have been studied.
Right,
And what is perfectly clear, is that there are some people, okay, there are some people who want to die before they're suffering, and sometimes medicine can alleviate that suffering. And when the doctors succeed, then people want to live longer. That's established.
hmm
It's also established that there are people whose suffering cannot be alleviated,
right,
and they ask to die. They beg to die. And most often, no one listens to them. No one takes them seriously. They just go on as if nothing had ever happened. And that is putting people in hell. And it is not the right of human beings to put people at hell. If you believe in the judgment day, that's God's right. Okay? But we don't have that right. And if God thinks that someone has violated, a royal precept by asking to be for an end to their life, well, then that'll come up on the judgment day if the opponents are correct. So let it come up then. And stop accusing the people who desperately care for these people who are suffering, okay, at the risk of their own lives, livelihoods, and sanity. Those are established facts, by the way, thanks to some
right,
brave researchers.
right.
Okay, stop accusing them of being, secret assassins. They are not assassins. They're trying to help the people they love out of an impossible situation.
Thank you for your very outspoken and definitely heartfelt words on the right to die. We're talking to Dr. Mark Hunter, an old friend and an expert on the two topics that we went through today, Mark, press freedom and the right to die. I traditionally end these podcasts with a toast. My glass of wine is over here out of sight.
If you'd warned
I
me, I
should
would have
have
gotten a
warned. I should
beer.
have supplied you one. I owe you a drink. I'll give it to you the next time
Yeah.
I see you. But we're going to toast today brave people. And that includes journalists who fight government and economics and the distrust of people to continue doing a very important job, and to brave people who face death, sometimes because they have to and there's no other way out. A toast to
Yep.
them. Okay.
Yep. And they're brave too.
They are. Thank you very much. This was so interesting. Appreciate it, Mark.
My pleasure, Rosemary. Anytime. I hope we can do it again.